February 1st, 1942. The days of training and patrolling are over. Time to take the fight to the enemy. Target, Wochi Island, Central Pacific in the Marshall Islands chain. Objective, deny the Japanese a base for possible invasion of the Hawaiian Islands. Strategy, destroy Japanese airstrips, fuel storage tanks, ammunition dumps, and anti-aircraft batteries. Enterprise's task force cruiser USS Northampton kicks off the attack. Her 8-inch guns hurl their 260-pound projectiles 5 miles across the sea to their targets on the island. 100 miles west of Wochi, surveillance has revealed a heavy concentration of enemy vessels at Kwajalein Atoll. So while Northampton takes care of Wochi, Enterprise sends its SBD bombers to strike the Kwajalein anchorage. Dusty Cleese speeds south toward an outpost on tiny Kwajalein Island.
I found a cruiser there. So no fighters around. Oh boy, this is great. So I got up there and I made this dive.
Cleese has just one bomb aboard, a 500-pounder.
He knew he had one shot only. Everything had to be perfect. And he did it.
I clobbered it.
As he pulls out of his dive, Cleese is feeling pressure 5 to 6 times the force of gravity. But there's no better feeling than getting right up in the enemy's face and delivering a knockout blow. 5 miles to the north, a fellow Enterprise dive bomber pilot has discovered a cluster of merchant ships near the Carlos Pass. He scores a well-timed hit on a tanker scrambling toward the channel's mouth.
It was trying to go out at sea, and he hit it right on the head and caught it on fire.
The tanker just happens to be at the choke point of the channel, and it blocks passage by the remaining ships.
Well, here were all these ships inside of the lagoon.
Then the USS Enterprise launched 9 torpedo planes after it to go get those remaining ships that were caught inside of the channel.
Practically no anti-aircraft gun, and here these things couldn't move. Well, it was like shooting fish in a barrel.
The Enterprise TBDs pass over Kwajalein Lagoon and drop their payloads, but there's not a single explosion. At this point in the war, American torpedo technology is hit or miss, and it's mostly miss. 9 out of every 10 torpedoes veers off course or fails to detonate. It's a frustrating reality for the pilots risking their lives at Kwajalein.
Launched their torpedoes, not one hit.
Luckily, there are American bombers in the area too, and their explosives are working just fine. Kwajalein Harbor is a smoking, burning wreck by the time Admiral Halsey calls off the attack. Some 90 enemy personnel are killed at Kwajalein, including the area commander. The Marshall Islands raids are a huge success, and Enterprise returns to a hero's welcome at Pearl Harbor. Mid-April 1942. Sailors on the deck of USS Enterprise notice that the air is getting chillier. They've been operating in the steamy South Seas for weeks, and now the brisk weather is making it very obvious that they're sailing north. But only the Admiral seems to know why. At roughly 6 a.m. on the morning of April 12th, the men of the Big E and her task force notice a completely unexpected sight in the distance. It's their sister carrier, USS Hornet, but she's carrying mysterious cargo.
There was something wrong with Hornet's silhouette. What was wrong with it is the flight deck was half covered with these big, strange-looking airplanes that were not painted Navy colors, and they weren't naval aircraft. And they finally figured out they were B-25s, and they had Army camouflage painted on them.
The Army B-25s are here to make a bombing run on the heart of Japan. Target: Tokyo and other industrial centers around Japan. Objective: take out factories and munitions plants and demoralize the enemy by assaulting her homeland. Strategy: attack with 16 B-25 bombers launched from USS Hornet.
I don't like to use the word revenge, but sure. I mean, there was some revenge that they wanted to get some back. You know, they were mad, and they weren't stand for it then, and we don't stand for it now. You know, you reach out and you hurt us, we're coming after you. And you know what? There ain't a damn thing you can do about it.
Army Air Corps Lieutenant Colonel James Doolittle has agreed to lead the daring mission. And he's chosen the B-25 as the aircraft on which to trust his life. The North American Mitchell B-25B is a twin-engine medium bomber with a range, depending on bomb load, of about 1,300 miles. It's typically manned by a crew of 5 and can deliver up to 5,000 pounds of bombs. While other bombers have more range and power, the B-25's modest wingspan of 67 feet 7 inches will allow USS Hornet to fit more bombers on its flight deck. The plan is for the carrier to get Doolittle's bombers within striking distance of Japan. They will then launch, bomb Tokyo and their other targets, and continue on to land in friendly remote Chinese territory. In order to ensure that Doolittle's bombers have enough fuel to reach the designated landing area in China, Hornet and Enterprise need to get the planes within 400 miles of the Japanese mainland, but bad luck intervenes.
We ran across this little, what we thought was a fishing boat. Turned out to be a patrol boat. We didn't pick it up on our surface radar, it was that small.
So they had to launch, and they had to launch right then and there. There was no turning back.
The carriers are 650 miles from the Japanese mainland. It means Doolittle and his men might not have the fuel to make it out safely. They choose to go anyway. April 18th, 1942, at 8:20 a.m., the B-25 Mitchell bombers prepare for takeoff. This is the first time a B-25 has attempted to take off from a carrier in combat.
Now, that aircraft wasn't designed to be taken off in an aircraft carrier, so they really had to get as much wind over the deck as possible because wind over the deck translates to flying speed off the angle.
Once the bombers are speeding down the flight deck, there's only 2 places they can end up. With enough speed, they'll be in the sky. Too slow, and they'll be in the sea.
Taking off in a high wind, high sea environment is always tricky. Your number one priority right there is going to be making sure that the aircraft is lifting off the end of the deck when the bow is high.
Making it even more difficult, the bombers have been stripped of all non-essential items to make room for more fuel and bombs. They're even heavier than usual. Colonel Doolittle himself is the first to go.
I mean, they got all these aircraft stacked up on the flight deck, so the first guys to take off have the least amount of runway.
Doolittle's bomber struggles off the deck, but manages to stay airborne. 4 hours after launch, the bombers finally reach their targets. Despite enemy flak, each plane drops 2,000 pounds of hell into the heart of the Japanese homeland. They then turn toward the Chinese coast and their designated landing area. But as the last drops of fuel funnel from the bombers' tanks, most of Doolittle's air crews have no choice but to bail out or crash land. 3 crewmen perish in the process. 8 are captured by the Japanese. The physical damage done to Japan has been negligible, but the psychological impact is truly significant on both sides of the Pacific.
It was definitely a morale booster, not only for our servicemen, but for our whole country. At a time of war, when the enemy is getting nailed at the heart of their homeland, it makes you feel like, you know what? You tried to stop us, ain't happening. We're coming after you. It showed the Japanese that they weren't invincible, that we could reach out and we could touch them.
October 26, 1942. 2 months after a severe baptism of fire near Guadalcanal, USS Enterprise is once again at sea, heading for a showdown with the Japanese fleet. 3,300 miles from Pearl Harbor, Enterprise rendezvous with sister carrier USS Hornet. The mighty carriers form one massive new task force, TF-61. The combined force of the two carriers, 136 aircraft, a battleship, 6 cruisers, and 14 destroyers rallies in preparation for the coming battle. Target, the Santa Cruz Islands. Objective, keep Henderson Field on Guadalcanal in American hands. Strategy, lure the Japanese fleet away from Guadalcanal and destroy them. But Enterprise and Hornet are outnumbered and outgunned. The Japanese flat tops can deliver the punch of more than 150 warplanes, with the backup firepower of nearly 40 surface vessels. But if the Marines are going to hold Guadalcanal, they'll need naval support. They'll need USS Enterprise. The fate of the campaign now rests on Enterprise and an outnumbered American task force.
We don't pick our battles based on odds. Sometimes the battles pick you. We certainly don't run from a battle based on being outnumbered. You adapt your tactics to the scenarios at hand. But we don't run from a fight. And we didn't then.
Radar operators on Enterprise report a flight of incoming Japanese dive bombers. Her captain directs the ship into a left turn, an erratic course to deflect the enemy planes. As Enterprise turns, she opens herself up to another dive bomber. Before the gunners can react, it's too late. The plane releases a 550-pound bomb right over Enterprise. The bomb penetrates through the flight deck and out the portside bow. A Dauntless parked on the flight deck is blown off the ship and into the sea. Shrapnel hits the hull like a shotgun blast. 2,500 feet above, another Val dive bomber closes in and draws a bead on the Big E. The Val faces a firestorm of American flak and drops its payload. The direct hit penetrates the flight deck just behind the forward elevator and splits in two. Half of the bomb explodes in the hangar deck, destroying anything in its path. The second half hammers through to the third deck and kills 34 men in the very heart of the ship. Seconds later, a near miss tears a 50-foot scar in Enterprise's hull below the waterline and opens her starboard fuel tanks to the sea. Now that the dive bombers have had their shot at Enterprise, it's time for the dreaded torpedo planes. 16 Kate torpedo planes head right for Enterprise. Within minutes, they will have the Big E dead in their sights.
And whichever way we turned, they were going to get us, so they thought.
It's a classic hammer and anvil assault. 8 Kates will attack from starboard, while 8 more come around the port side. If everything goes to plan, Enterprise will have nowhere to run. One by one, they come in low and release their warheads. 3 torpedoes splash into the water ahead of Enterprise. Anxiously, nearly every man watching waits for the collision of the warheads.
And the captain did some pretty deft maneuvering. Those 3 torpedoes slid to the stern of the ship on our port side, so close that you couldn't look over the side and hardly see them.
800 yards ahead, another torpedo splashes as a Kate drops its payload. The captain orders a full right rudder as the torpedo closes in. It's another close call.
We evaded them all. That ship of ours could turn sharply. She'd lean way over, and boy, you thought it was going over, but she could evade.
In all, Enterprise dodges 9 torpedoes in this single day of fighting. Enterprise is now the last of her kind, the only surviving ship of her class, and the only carrier left in the Pacific. The entire naval campaign now rests on her shoulders and the crew that mans her.
So what did that do? That left the Enterprise. Then there was one.
Enterprise versus Japan. Think about it, that's pretty weighty. I think from a morale perspective alone, that was very, very significant.
We're the last ones, and we're the only good target for the Japs. Who's going to get it next?
Though the loss of Hornet and so many U.S. sailors is a staggering blow, the Japanese can't claim victory. The cream of their aviation wing, more than 130 veteran airmen, have fallen to the guns of USS Enterprise and Task Force 61. These are losses that Japan will never be able to recover. Once again, Enterprise has somehow survived yet another violent encounter with the Japanese Navy. Despite being outgunned and outnumbered, she and her crew have lived to fight another day.
I think it's amazing to sense that the USS Enterprise survived all those battles. But then again, it just goes to show you about the discipline and the overall spirit of that crew. It had everything to do with the spirit of those fighting men that were actually on that ship.
November 14th, 1942. For 2 days, USS Enterprise and the U.S. fleet have been fighting the battle of their lives in the waters off Guadalcanal. Now, in the darkness of night, an enemy gunship force led by battlewagon Kirishima is about to pound the U.S. forces on the island with a massive barrage. But what the Japanese don't know is that Enterprise battleships South Dakota and USS Washington have just been sent to stop them dead in the water. From the bridge of the Washington, Admiral Lee sends a fighting message to the rest of the fleet. Stand aside. I am coming through. USS Washington is a North Carolina-class battleship right out of the Philadelphia Navy Yard. Overall length, 729 feet. Displacement, 35,000 tons. Her weaponry is 9 16-inch guns, 20 5-inch rifles, and more than a dozen automatic anti-aircraft guns. 12:15 a.m. Radar on Battleship Washington picks up the location of enemy warships east of the volcanic peak known as Savo Island. 10 miles away, Battleship Kirishima and an enemy fleet head right for Guadalcanal on their mission to hit the Marines. But the USS Washington has the Imperial battle wagons dead in sight. Washington's big 16-inch rifles open fire before the Japanese know what's hitting them. Her first victim takes a load of American lead as Washington roars out a storm of heavy fire that devastates the Imperial warship. In another clash of iron, Imperial and American vessels square off in a gruesome display of firepower. In less than 3 minutes, USS Washington hammers out an amazing 42 rounds from her main battery. Now she squares off with Battleship Kirishima. The thunder of 14-inch and 16-inch rifles and cannons echoes across the sea as Washington mauls the Battleship Kirishima with her broadsides.
During that battle, it's interesting that you have a preponderance on each side of their preferred weapon of choice. The Americans bring much heavier gunpowder to the fight. The Japanese, for their part, bring much heavier torpedo firepower. And yet, in this particular fight, the Japanese are not able to make that advantage in torpedoes tell.
From the coconut-lined banks of Guadalcanal, Enterprise pilots and Marines can clearly see the blaze of the nighttime slaughter.
It was 20 miles away, but it sounded like out just next door to your tent. These battleships having at each other.
From where we were, we could see the flash of the big battleship cannons, the cruiser cannons, and the lesser ones down to 5-inch going off, and the Japs were shooting at us. It was a horrendous battle.
Battleship Kirishima is finished. Her hull and superstructure are torn by the American shells. With fires raging over her decks, the enemy crew is forced to abandon ship. USS Washington is the only American battleship to actually sink an enemy battleship in the Second World War. Now, she and South Dakota lay into Japanese cruisers and destroyers, firing rapid broadsides from 16-inch and 5-inch guns. "242 Americans and 249 Japanese are killed." And the following day, battleship Kirishima is scuttled. She joins her sister, Hiei, in a watery grave in the depths of Iron Bottom Sound. For the Japanese, defeat in the November clash at Iron Bottom Sound destroys any hope for victory at Guadalcanal. They will simply have to let the Americans keep Henderson Field. Friday, November 13th, 1942, 1:48 a.m. Anti-aircraft cruiser USS Atlanta patrols the dark waters off Guadalcanal Island in the South Pacific. USS Enterprise has been out of action for 2 weeks, and with all the other carriers in the Pacific down for the count, these smaller ships must face the enemy alone. Atlanta has sent her share of Japanese planes to the hunting grounds of hell, but tonight she's stalking Imperial warships, one of 13 American vessels on the prowl for an enemy force of destroyers, battleships, and cruisers. 2 massive naval groups are about to collide in a terrific clash of steel. But what the crew of Atlanta doesn't know is that they're already locked in the crosshairs of the enemy. The first of the enemy gunships move into position to bombard Henderson Field from Guadalcanal's Sea Lark Channel. But these bloody waters will soon go by another name: Iron Bottom Sound, the final grave for dozens of warships and thousands of men. In the pre-dawn darkness, the enemy ships run right into the guns of USS Atlanta and the American surface fleet patrolling the waters off Guadalcanal. Like battling pirate ships, the two sides pound each other from close range, and the cruiser Atlanta is caught in a firestorm. Steel lightning explodes as shells and giant orange tracers fire into the night. Japanese and American gunships crucify each other with savage volleys of shot and shell in Guadalcanal's Iron Bottom Sound. Hit by the direct fire from more than 6 American ships, the destroyer Akatsuki blows up. Destroyer USS Laffey closes in alongside battleship Hiei and rakes her decks with rapid-fire 5-inch shells and machine guns. From the island, U.S. Marines watch the epic battle unfold. It goes on for hours.
One of the surviving American naval officers described this particular action as a barroom brawl after the lights had been shot out, and that's exactly what it was.
Dawn reveals the scene of an apocalypse. The waters off Guadalcanal are coated in oil, debris, and human remains. Hundreds of sailors, including 2 American admirals, have been slaughtered in one of the grittiest naval gun battles of the war. Throughout the morning, a sea tug navigates the bloody waters, rescuing American sailors. Most Japanese survivors are killed. Among the casualties of November 13th is cruiser USS Juneau. Lost when the ship sunk are all 5 Sullivan brothers of Waterloo, Iowa.
As a result of the loss of the 5 Sullivan brothers on the USS Juneau, the Navy implemented a sole survivor policy, meaning that the sole surviving son of a family would be reassigned to non-hazardous duty. The thought being that if he continued to serve in hazardous duty, they didn't want a family that lost all of its sons in combat. So the result was sole survivors would be reassigned and would not be in harm's way.
The long morning of November 13th is one of the darkest periods in the history of the U.S. Navy. The grim tally. Cruisers Atlanta and Juneau are gone. USS Laffey and 4 destroyers are wiped out. 4 additional Allied ships are damaged, and more than 1,400 Americans have perished. Once again, the U.S. Navy has had to pay a terrible price to hold Guadalcanal for another day.